Okay, just to review. George and Harold made these evil toilets that were eating people, and now they're going to go to the cafeteria to get cafeteria food. And this is called Chapter 15, Creamed Chipped Beef to the Rescue. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants got inside the school safely and closed the front door behind them. "I think the toilets are all outside," said George. "But not for long," said Harold. Quickly they ran to the school's kitchen and discovered a cart holding a large vat of something green and sludgy. "Yuck," said George, holding his nose. "What is that stuff?" "I think it's tomorrow's lunch," said Harold. "Perfect," said George. "I never thought I'd be glad to see creamed chipped beef." Together, they wheeled the tub of stinky green goop down the hallway and out the side door of the school. Captain Underpants sat on the cart and stretched a pair of underwear over his head like a slingshot. George stood over him, scooped some cafeteria food into the underwear, and stretched it back. Harold wheeled the cart toward the talking toilets. "Tra-la-la-la!" shouted Captain Underpants loudly. The talking toilets turned and saw our three heroes. All at once, they shouted, "Yum, yum, eat 'em up!" And the chase was on. Harold pulled the cart across the playground as the toilet zipped after them. "Fire one!" cried Captain Underpants. George shot a glob of cream-chipped beef into the first toilet's mouth. The toilet swallowed it whole. Harold kept pulling, as George scooped another serving into the underwear and pulled it back. "Fire two!" cried Captain Underpants. Zip went the cafeteria food, right into the second toilet's mouth. The whole process repeated itself until every last toilet had swallowed at least 2 servings of cream-chipped beef. We're almost out of ammo," Captain Underpants shouted. "And I don't think I can run it any more," said Harold, huffing and puffing. "Don't worry, look," said George, pointing at the toilets. They had all slowed down and were beginning to groan and wobble around. Their eyes crossed, and they turned an odd shade of green. "Look out," cried Harold. "I think they're going to hurl." And that's just what they did. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants watched as the toilets upchucked everything they had eaten during the day. The cream-chipped beef, the underwear, even the teachers all came out without a scratch. Then the toilet spun around in small circles and fell to the ground, dead. George checked the teachers. "They're alive," he said. "Unconscious, but alive." "Wow," said Harold. "That was easy." Too easy," said George. "What do you mean?" asked Harold. George pulled their comic book out of his back. Oh, my cat is back. George pulled their comic book out of his backpack and showed it to Harold. "Remember how the Patsy 2000 turned everything on the front cover of our comic book to life?" he asked. "Yeah, so?" said Harold. "Well," said George, as he pointed to the Turbo Toilet 2000 on the front cover of the comic, "we haven't seen him yet." Chapter 16, The Turbo Toilet 2000. Suddenly, the Turbo Toilet 2000 came charging out the front door of the school with a terrible crash. The earth rumbled beneath its mighty footsteps as nearly a ton of twisting steel and raging porcelain descended upon our heroes. "You 3 meddling fools may have destroyed my army of talking toilets," screamed the Turbo Toilet 2000. "But you're all out of cafeteria food. How are you going to stop me?" "I'll tell you how," Captain Underpants said boldly, "with wedgie power." "Wait, Captain Underpants," cried George. "You can't fight that thing. He'll rip you to pieces." "Boys," said Captain Underpants nobly, "I must fight valiantly for truth, justice, and all that is pre-shrunk and cottony." Captain Underpants leapt into the Turbo Toilet 2000, and the battle began. "I sure hope this doesn't lead to extremely graphic violence," said Harold. "Me too," said George. Chapter 17. The Extremely Graphic Violence Chapter, Part 1 in Flip-O-Rama. Warning. The following chapter contains intense scenes showing a man in his underwear battling a giant toilet. Please do not try this at home. And this is just how to do the Flip-O-Rama. So this is wedgie power versus potty power. And let me see if I can somehow do this. Quote. Let's try another one. Oh no, the potty power punch prevails. Okay, and one more. The carnivorous commode captures the captain. Okay, and we'll read a little bit more. Chapter 18, Harold and the Purple Ballpoint Pen. Everything seemed hopeless. Captain Underpants had slipped and fallen into the mouth of the Turbo Toilet 2000, and now the giant toilet was coming after George and Harold. Ha ha ha, laughed the powerful porcelain predator. Once I have eaten you two kids up, I will take over the world. Not if we have anything to say about it, yelled George. George and Harold ran into the school and locked the door behind them. The Turbo Toilet 2000 banged against the door with its fists, shouting, "You boys can't hide in there forever." George and Harold ran to the gym. "I've got a plan," said George. "We need to invent a character who can defeat a giant robot toilet." "How about a giant robot urinal?" asked Harold. "We can call it the Urinator." "No way," said George. "They'll never let us get away with that in a children's book. We're skating on thin ice as it is." "All right," said Harold. "How about a giant plunger robot? He can carry a real big plunger and—" "That's it!" cried George. So Harold took out his purple ballpoint pen and began to draw. "Give him laser eyes," said George. "All right," said Harold. "And give him turbo-atomic rocket boosters," said George. "Got it," said Harold. "And make him obey our every command," said George. "I'm way ahead of you," said Harold. Harold finished his drawing, and George inspected it carefully. "This just might work," said George. "Yeah," said Harold, "if the Patsy 2000 can hold out." The boys turned and looked at the dented, cracked, and beaten-up machine laying on its side in the corner. George and Harold pushed the Patsy 2000 upright and dusted it off. "Come on, Patsy, old girl," said George. We really need you now." "Yeah," said Harold. "The fate of the entire planet is in our hands." Okay, and we'll finish the rest later.